Guys, we're making a conference table out of black walnut and supercast, Crater Lake blue and black metallic. This thing is looking so sweet. Stay tuned, guys, learn some tips and tricks and enjoy the video. Get some. Step one, I'm gonna remove any loose bark. This one's barely hanging on there. Awesome. That makes my job easier. Oh, look at that. $28, $30, $30, $34. Bingo. All right, I got the center of the black walnut slab marked. I'm gonna rip that big boy right in half. Then we're gonna take it over to the slab jig table, level the bottom side, build a form. Then we're pouring supercast. The bottom of my slabs have been nice and leveled. They're gonna sit nice and flat in the form I'm gonna build. The worms have been going to town on my epoxy edges. So I'm gonna get a brush, I'm gonna sand these out, get all that debris out of there because I don't want it floating inside my epoxy river. I'm gonna get those edges taken care of, and then I'm gonna build a form on that table, cut those slabs to fit in there, pin them down, pour the river. If I were gonna keep my river translucent where you could see this edge, I would totally take time, sand this, get it looking really pretty, but I'm going 100% opaque. No one's gonna see this edge, so I'm gonna leave it just the way it is. Move on to the next step. My table is 2 3/8. So I'm gonna just make my form boards go up to 2 5/8. Figure out the height of your slabs. Cut your form boards a good 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch taller. That way you have plenty of room in case you overfill that river, some epoxy flows over, it'll still be inside that form and not all over your floor. All right, let me get this board. We're gonna put some Tyvek tape on this wood. Go with the saw guide, folks. Perfect cuts every time. Indestructible, throw it in the back of the truck, it's all good. If you're uncomfortable using a circular saw, this takes all the worry away. Pick it up in the link below, stonecoatcountertops.com. Guys, my table is leveled. We're ready to build the epoxy form. I'm using 3/4 inch melamine. I'm gonna cover that with Tyvek tape. I'm gonna rip my form walls thicker than my slabs. I'll cover those with Tyvek tape. We'll attach it all together. I'll seal it up so we have no leaks. Then we're ready to pour some epoxy. Pro tip when figuring out how much to measure. You want the width, you want the length, and you need the depth. I'll leave a link in the description below to the perfect site to let you know how much epoxy casting resin to mix up for your river table. Supercast casting resin can go up to 2 inches. My table is about 2 3/8 thick, and it's also very wide. I'm making my form a little bit bigger than the finished product is gonna be. That gives me a little wiggle room to square up this table after I've poured that casting resin, but before I pour my seal and flood coat. I'm gonna get this where I want it, tag it down to my table, right where my form's gonna be. So it won't move. I'll tape the Tyvek, I'll do the forms. If it doesn't wanna pop off, which it's gonna because of that Tyvek tape, I'll be able to pop up these screws that won't be covered by table or epoxy. Let's say I don't use Tyvek, I just go right to this melamine. It's gonna wanna stick to epoxy. This is glossy, but it's still textured enough to bite to your curing epoxy. And you could be hammering and hammering away trying to pop this off your casting river. Don't do that. Use the slab jig. Comes off in a few passes. See ya. All right, I'm just getting my form boards flush to the outside of my form. We'll tape around the perimeter with some Tyvek tape. Keep that epoxy in there. We're ready to rock and roll. To make sure your form doesn't leak, you want to use a caulking. I'm gonna caulk the inside lip here, real small bead, but it's gonna seal up this Tyvek wall to the Tyvek bottom. We're gonna let that skin over and dry. This is our 10 1/4 inch saw, the Big Red, the Saw Squatch that cuts through these jumbo slabs like butter. All right, we're back. The silicone's dry. It's time to mix up and pour some supercast. I'm gonna go with Crater Lake Blue, and then I'm gonna pour an accent black metallic right down the center of that river. Incorporate those colors together. It's gonna be super sweet. This river's jumbo. I'm gonna do it in 2 pours to be safe. Even though supercast can go up to 2 inches, I'm 2 feet wide for the majority of this river. That's an insane amount of epoxy mass. Err on the side of caution, do it in 2 pours if you can. Plus my table is over 2 inches thick. I'm about 2 3/8. Split it up into 2 pours, be safe. I'm gonna grab my wood slabs, I'm gonna place them in the form, I'm gonna measure out and see how much supercast I'm gonna need to mix up. 18, 17, 15 1/2, 13 1/2. So we were about 19, 18 1/2, 18 1/2. I'm gonna get an average. I'm gonna split this up into 2 because we kind of get tighter here. Pretty uniform most of the way. 19 to 18 right here. So I'm just gonna go on that larger number and I'll go 19 wide by 5 foot long. So the first section of my river is 19 inches wide, 60 inches long. Now let's figure out a depth. We're at 2 1/2 easy by 2.5 inches tall. 3 measurements you need for volume in gallons. Let's figure out the other section. So we were 5 feet, about here. That's gonna be 5 feet because we're about 10 feet. Yeah, we'll call that 5 feet as well. By 18, 17, 16, 14 1/2. So let's go, that was 19. We'll just go 16 on this side because we're from 16 in. Yeah, we'll go an average of 16 wide. Let's go 17 wide just to be safe. 60 inches long, 2.5 tall. Now we know the 2 sections of river, their average width, depth, and height. I'm gonna go sit at the computer and put this into a super fancy website. All right, volume calculator gallons, search. Length, width, and height volume calculator. Sensors 1. That's the pro tip of the century. This guy is super good to use to figure out your volume. We are length 60, and then you click here, we go inches. Width 19, height 2.5. And then down here, waiting for valid input. Select unit. We're gonna go gallons, USA liquid. We need 12 gallons. 60 long. Now we're gonna go 17 wide for that other section. That's 11 gallons. 23 gal of super cast. 23 gallons of supercast going into this jumbo epoxy river. This is the most I've ever mixed up. I'm quite excited. You could probably see by the expression on my face. Let's do this. I'm gonna pour 50% of this today and the other half tomorrow. So I'm gonna go grab 7 kits today. Boom. bro. I'm gonna get my bottles prepped. The ones I know I'm gonna mix right now. 4.5 gallons is what'll be in there. I'm gonna be mixing up 3 separate 5-gallon buckets for my initial pour. And to set yourself up for success, only set the bottles that you're gonna be mixing in this batch within reach. So I will know I've properly mixed when all 6 of these bottles are completely empty and in my bucket. That's a pro tip. So this is a big 5-gallon bucket mixer. I'm gonna go all the way to the bottom, pick it up a hair, and start mixing. Mix on medium to slow speed for a few minutes. And then I'm gonna add 2 Crater Lake Blues for every 4.5 gallons I mix up. That way I keep my color ratio the same. I'm gonna slow this down and rub the bottom. And sides. I'm pulling up that mixing paddle, making sure those sides get rubbed. Knock off any undermixed epoxy on the clinging to the sides and bottom. Perfect. Rub the bottom one more time. And I'm gonna pick it back up to mid-range. Crater Lake Blue, just one of our many color additives designed for woodworking with epoxy or countertops with epoxy. Check us out at the Color Center, stonecoatcountertops.com, the Epoxy Color Center. Hundreds of other colors, but Crater Lake Blue and Black Walnut, they were meant for each other. I'm going 2 full Crater Lake Blues per 4.5 gallons. That should be plenty of metallic powder to make this completely opaque. Crater Lake Mountain in there now. Ooh, I can't wait for this. Here we go. Crater Lake Blue, Black Walnut. Don't forget to torch, as this is self-leveling. Torch every few inches. That really helps get rid of that air. But the casting epoxy is so thin, it's designed to release the air, so don't panic on it, no rush. I'm gonna let that level out. I'm gonna mix up some more epoxy. Good stuff. 3 A's, 3 B's, I'm good to start mixing. We're gonna go heavy black right there, heavy blue. This has been the funnest day at work in a very long time. I'm gonna pour in this black, we'll swirl it, and then I'm gonna put on my supports to hold the slabs down, because at this point, even as heavy as this black walnut is, they're gonna start becoming buoyant and float. I got a boo-boo. I got a tiny leak in this miter. I must have scraped my silicone putting the slab in. Don't panic, there's a few ways to seal these up. You could use flex putty. That stuff works really well. You can use clay. I'll smush that in there. I'm gonna clean it with isopropyl alcohol, get most of it away. And what I'm gonna do, and what I find that works really well, is hot glue. I'm gonna put a bead of hot glue in there. It dries, it seals it up. We'll be good to go. I'll leave this, we'll have no leaks. This is the only spot I saw. So I'm gonna spray some alcohol on this rag. I'm gonna wipe that off, get all that residue out of there. And then just a bead of hot glue seals it up. I'm gonna let it start to cool off a hair, and then I'm gonna smush it with my finger. Okay, man, look at that piece, looks tight. This thing is looking fantastic. Ooh, I cannot wait to show my customer this. Guys, it's been 18 hours since we poured the first half of our Epoxy River with Supercast. I'm really pleased with the color combo. So we're nice and sticky still. See this? This is what you want. We do not have to sand when your epoxy sticky like that. And you can see, as I mixed this yesterday, I coated the top of my edge. It's really sticky still, so we're gonna have a chemical bond as well as a mechanical bond. That's gonna bite really well. We do not need to worry about that edge delaminating later. Keeping this table from cupping or warping, that's perfect. No sanding needed. All right, I'm gonna mix up some more Supercast. I'm gonna fill it up all the way to the top, torch the air out. We're gonna let this cure 5 to 7 days right here in the form. We'll come back, we'll rip it out, we'll level it, and then we'll start sealing it with Stone Coat Epoxy. This is probably my best conference table yet. Mixing up 4.5 gallons, 3 kits. We're gonna fill this bad boy all the way back up. 3 of these Supercast kits fits very nicely in a 5-gallon bucket. I planned ahead with my customer. I'm in no rush to get this table done. You do not want to pour too much casting or Supercast in one mass. What can happen is it can heat up and you could get some cracks running through that casting resin. To help avoid that, if you have to run it full, if you have to go in a giant mass, throw a fan blowing cool air over the entire surface as it cures. It will affect the way that river looks with the wind, but it still looks very cool. But pouring this in 2 was the right choice. It is enormous. So I have 3 part A's. Now I'm gonna pour my 3 part B's. Starting out with a good mixture and a good ratio is extremely important. Swirling this epoxy kind of releases any air bubbles that are clinging to that bottom layer of epoxy as well. So I'll give it a quick swirl. I'll come back, I'll torch, and then I'm gonna mix up my next batch. So it's important, guys, to keep the same ratio of colors. So when I go to rip this and square off my table to the finish, you won't see the line where these 2 epoxy pores meet. It'll meld perfectly. You can see the air that I kind of pulled up right there, folks. So all these little air bubbles are clinging to that bottom layer. Give it a swirl, it brings up to the surface, and bye, Felicia. To remove air out of any of our epoxy, just sweep the surface with a heat source. Propane torch, heat gun, blow dryer. In order of best to worst, propane torch best, heat gun second, blow dryer third best. Sweep the surface 1 inch or 2 from the epoxy, keeping that head moving quickly eliminates any air. What you don't want to do is just slam the air in one spot and cook it. It will go for a long time before you do any damage, but don't do that, that's bad practice. The guys formulating and engineering our epoxy formulations know their stuff. They're willing to work with you guys. If you have some epoxy ideas, let us know. We can help your epoxy business blow up and become reality. How many? That was 4 buckets. 6, 9, 12 kits. I overestimated a little too much. What'd I say, 15 yesterday, huh? But I have enough material. You don't want to be right here going, no, I need to go order some epoxy. The supercast and casting epoxy, if kept from freezing and out of direct sunlight, can last for years on the shelf. Keep those lids tight. It's okay to store some in the garage. Just make sure you have enough for your project. I haven't leveled the top. You want to keep as much wood on your river table for as long as possible, because I'm going to level this down. I didn't want to make this perfectly level on top and bottom, and then I get a little twist and I have to level it more. Pretty soon your slab starts to get small. So pro tip, folks, level the bottom, don't level the top. Level the top after your epoxy river. Wipe your hands before grabbing your torch. It'll make it last a ton longer. I've split my slab in half before leveling the bottom of each side independently. And the reason I did that is I had a twist. My end's kind of cupped up. That's why I'm routed right here. I eliminated that because I came way up, which would have meant I would have had to keep going way down to get that bow out. Evaluate your slab before you even cut it at all. Look where those high points are. If you can eliminate that little high point and flip it over and it lays way flat, you're gonna save yourself tons more material for later on, like when I go to router this next. Awesome. I'm gonna let it pillow and stuff, let that air come, and then I'll come back and torch this, but I don't think I'm adding any more epoxy. We're right to the brim right there. And because yesterday I pushed epoxy up on my edge and it was real sticky and gooey, it's perfectly sealed. No air is coming off that edge. And I know I'm gonna have a really, really strong bite from that epoxy to my wood. These go all the way through, because when I went to push this down yesterday, blue came up through here. So this crack goes all the way through. I just keep pulling the material over the crack because it'll swallow it in. I'm back with a quick torch. Bingo, bango, bongo. I've filled my biggest cracks and fissures on the black walnut with the rest of my accent black supercast. The supercast portion of my epoxy river table is complete. We're gonna let it cure. I'm gonna keep it 68 to 70 degrees in my shop. I'm gonna let this cure in the form 5 to 7 business. We're gonna come back in 5 to 7 days and continue the river table making process. Coming up next, we're removing this table from the form. I'm gonna level the top. Then we're gonna finish this beautiful black walnut table with stone coat countertop epoxy. Learn those simple steps in the snap of my finger. I'll be back in 5 days. All right, this beauty is dried. Nice and pretty, rock hard. I'm gonna pull this beast out of my form, flip it over, router in some channels to install some steel support bars. That's gonna keep this table from cupping when it's living in its final location. Man, that river looks so sweet. Okay. There's a small bit of epoxy river biting in the middle. I just took my time using those 2 flat bars to slowly pop between the Tyvek tape and the wood table. And then I'd use this bigger bar just to get the very tip in there, give me a little upward pressure, popped right off that Tyvek. I'm gonna need help moving this. How heavy is it? Wow. Oh, I might have a hernia now. All right, I'm gonna lay out some steel support bars that I'm gonna router in and glue into this table to keep it from bowing. Maybe 20 inches, 30, 40, 50, 70. So my steel supports are ready. I ground them to make them rough so that epoxy bites really well. This is 3/4 inch tube steel. It's hollow. I'm gonna use hot glue to plug up both ends, so when I epoxy this in as supports, my epoxy doesn't fill this up. I don't need to fill that up with epoxy and waste material there. Yeah, working real good. Okay, the next step, I'm gonna use a router, a 7/8 inch plunge bit to router a channel to fit my steel. It's a little bit bigger than my steel itself, so there's room for epoxy to envelop that steel, marry it to the wood, and keep that from bowing. I'm gonna put 6 pieces in, 20 inches apart, starting with the first one 10 inches from this edge. They're 41 inches across, almost the width of my whole table. I'll clamp down a straight edge, get my depth right here, and then I'll just quickly router in little channels. My bars have dried perfectly. It's now time to clean this up, flip it over, grab my slab jig, and we're gonna start leveling out this table. I'm gonna then square off my ends, get those perfect, and then it's time to start the seal coat process. Grab your dust mask. It's gonna be dusty, but that slab jig makes extremely quick work out of leveling big table projects like this. This thing weighs way too much to load into my truck and yard it down to a giant planer. The Stone Coat slab jig is designed perfectly for this exact project. I have a nice flat large table. It glides right along these edges and will level anything in its path. All right guys, I almost got it ready to rock and roll. I'm almost ready to square this table up. I just have this little low spot right here. I got little saw marks, so I'm gonna lower my router bit just a hair more, get rid of these saw marks, and we're ready to square this table up and start the seal coat process. Your species of wood that you're working with is gonna tell you how deep you can go. I'm working with black walnut. It's a really dense hardwood, so I'm only taking a heavy 1/8 off each pass. With a redwood slab, you could take a little bit more each pass. Your router is gonna tell you by how fast it goes. If it starts to bog down, back it up, raise that router bit, give it a couple passes. You're gonna do faster and cleaner and more efficient work with less material removed each pass. That's a pro tip. The table is nice and flat. I'm gonna remove any surface planing router marks left behind using that router on the slab jig with my 50 grit metal fiber sanding disc. I'll remove any ridges or marks off that Epoxy River, and then I'll switch over to my random orbital sander. Start with 60 and go all the way up to 220. I'll square off my edges, and then it's time to start the seal coat process. Let's do this. My surface has been sanded to 220 grit. The next step, I'm gonna take care of the edges. I'll square them up, I'll round over the top and bottom, and then I'll sand them up to 220, and then it's time for the seal coat. Right, I got my new edge marked out nice and square on some tape. This table's a little too thick for my standard skill saw, so I got a jumbo one to use. which will just get this cut done in one nice clean cut. I also don't have a straight cut saw guide this dang long, so I'm just gonna use my giant jumbo level, clamp her down and go to work. All right, next step, let's sand these edges. Look how this looks even before I've applied epoxy on it. Nice and square, clean cut. I'm gonna start out with 60 grit, work my way up to 220, and I'm also gonna round over the top edge with the 1/8 inch roundover bit with my trim router. Okay, I'm ready. Test it out good. All right, guys, we're ready for epoxy. This table looks pretty sweet already. Everything's sanded to 220 grit. I'm gonna mix up 1 ounce per square foot of our normal stone coat countertop epoxy. I'm gonna apply 1 ounce per square foot and start filling in some of these cracks. While you hold the bucket. We're gonna use this shower squeegee. It works best to spread this thin seal coat. And mix this up a little bit more because this sprayed out. Wow, yes. The first coat of epoxy on any woodworking project should be very thin. Most woodworking projects require 3 1 ounce per square foot coatings of stone coat epoxy. That will seal up that wood, keep the air from coming into your final coat of epoxy. This is seal coat number 1. I'm gonna torch out any air that I incorporated while I mixed, but air is gonna come out of this wood slab. I'm gonna come back tomorrow. It's gonna have tons of little air bubbles. Sometimes this walnut even sucks up all of the epoxy. It'll absorb it in. And then I'm gonna walk away and air is gonna continue to come out of this wood. I'm gonna get rid of that with a blowtorch. You can also use a heat gun. Just sweep the project, keep that torch moving. You really can't hurt anything here. See, those are the air bubbles that are gonna keep on coming out on this first coat. You'll torch them and eliminate them, but they'll keep coming back. That's just air escaping out of that wood. I'm back, it's the next day, and seal coat number 1 is nice and dry. There's all these bubbles, and this is totally standard operating procedure. This is what we're sealing up, are all these bubbles, all that air coming out of that porous wood. There's some areas in my slab where the wood was so porous, it absorbed 100% of the epoxy. It's sealed up, you can tell, but it's dry to the touch. I'm gonna open up any of my closed bubbles by sanding the entire surface and edges with 220 grit sandpaper. I'll hit the edges by hand because this is my first seal coat. It's extremely thin and I don't want to go right back to raw wood. I'll be starting the seal coat process all over if I sand all the way to raw wood. You can see how big this bubble is. This has more epoxy than this section, so it's able to blow giant bubbles. This is what happens when you apply too much epoxy to your concrete slab when working with flooring epoxy. If I were to come back and I had big open bubbles like that, you want to fill that bubble before you apply that flood coat or air is going to come out of that hole. I'm going to sand, clean, and then apply seal coat number 2. It's really important for nice quality edges on your woodworking projects to sand those edges really smooth as you build up your seal coats. That way you're building up an even uniform layer every time you layer on. There's no high points or ridges to give you ripply edges. That's a pro tip. This isn't 100% necessary. I got a lot of that dust off with the air. I'm just using 91% isopropyl alcohol here to get any remaining epoxy sanding dust. Let's say you didn't get all the dust and you threw another seal coat on here. When you throw the epoxy on here, it disappears. That dust goes away. Like if I had a little bit of dust in these little pits, I'm not worried about it. When you throw wet epoxy on, that dust gets incorporated right into that wet new mixture and disappears. We already hit those edges. These edges look and feel so good for being only the first seal coat. Yeah, I'm gonna use my magic trowel today. I used that tiny little shower squeegee yesterday. I'm upgrading to my floor magic trowel. It's gonna go so much faster. All right, we're mixing up 1 ounce per square foot, again for our seal coat. I don't know why I didn't use this yesterday. You can either use a chop brush or your gloved hands work just as fine. We're just gonna take any of these runs and wet out our edges here, nice and even. Just gonna use my hand, I'm gonna save my brush. We're breaking up any surface tension, making any dry areas wet, and then the epoxy will flow perfectly uniform as it flows over our edges. I'm gonna get the air out of the epoxy that I incorporated while mixing with a blowtorch. You can also use a heat gun. Pro tip, get the epoxy off your gloves before you grab your torch. You can see though, a little bit of bubbles are still coming out. We're gonna have to, that's why we do 3 of these. What I wanna focus on are the deeper spots. Like this is a natural crack and a little deep spot where it's a little thicker. Really hit those spots good. All right, I'm gonna stick around and torch for about another 10, 20 minutes. Hit it a couple more times, and then this job is a wrap for today. The seal coat process is simple. It doesn't take very much time at all. I'm just gonna need to wait for this seal coat to dry about 18 hours before I come back and sand open those bubbles and apply seal coat number 3. Right, seal coat 2, nice and dry, way less bubbles. Only got a couple big problem areas. The knots are always gonna be a problem area because the knots have cracks and fissures and air bubbles like to come out of those. So same process. I'm applying seal coat number 3 today. I'm gonna lightly sand with 150 to 220 grit sandpaper. The more bubbles, the more nasty your seal coat is, go with a more heavy grit sandpaper. It'll be less time sanding. This is pretty smooth, so I'm gonna put on 220, sand the surface, sand my edges, and mix up another seal coat, 1 ounce per square foot. Apply it the same way I did, let that dry, and then we'll be back tomorrow to see how this thing is laying out. If I still have giant bubbles, I might apply another seal coat, or if it's looking pretty good, barely any bubbles at all, I'll apply a thick 3 ounce per square foot flood coat over this project, and then we're almost towards the end on this bad boy. But the next step, I'm gonna sand with 220, wipe the dust, and apply another seal coat. Now that, I just letting this glide across. When you put thin amounts of epoxy on, it won't completely self-level. I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking to seal up my wood. So I recommend I do at least 3 torchings to remove the air that I've incorporated. And that also depends on how much epoxy I mixed up. If it was a small batch and it was pure white, it would probably be 5, 6 passes to remove all the air. That batch was really, really clear. Not much air got incorporated into that. So 2 to 3 passings got rid of the air out of the epoxy that I mixed in. From here on out, it's gonna be coming out of the wood in little spots. That first seal coat, it came out everywhere. The second, probably 60% less bubbles, maybe even more. And this one will just have a couple problem areas where those knots are, is what I'm guessing on this next run. Minimum 3 passes with a heat source to remove air incorporated into the epoxy while mixing. It's the next day, my seal coat has dried nice. I still have some jumbo bubbles. I made the decision to apply an additional thin seal coat. Why? Because I want my bubbles to look like this real small before I proceed to that flood coat, because I already know this giant bubble is gonna keep producing air. So if I put a big thick coat on, it's gonna have jumbo bubbles. So I'll do the process one more time. Sand, clean, thin coat, let it dry, come back tomorrow. Hopefully we're doing a flood coat. I just sanded off that bubble and you can see the itty bitty hole that was causing that air, where most of the wood is still sealed except for that itty bitty spot. So I'm guessing when I sand this down, those are gonna be sealed up with this next seal coat. If you're working with a more porous slab of wood, it's gonna require more seal coats because a bunch of air is gonna come out of there. If you have a bunch of cracks, knots, stuff like that, air is gonna come out of that. So just nice and thin, build that up. All these have a good coating in the middle with a little pinhole. So once we get that pinhole filled up, we should be good to go. All right, we're mixing up 1 ounce per square foot. Here we go, put in part B first. We pour in part B first because it's a thinner material. The thinner material suspends the more dense A from just sinking right to the bottom in a big giant mass. This way we're kind of already incorporating the two when you pour them in the bucket. Pretty much done, guys. It's nice and early in my day, so I'll stick around for the next couple hours and hit my problem areas, right like here. Those spots that are bringing back my big bubbles. While my epoxy's flowing and open, I'll keep popping those. Because every time you pop it, more epoxy fills in that crevasse or fissure, whatever you want to call it, the crack. It's gonna fill it up eventually and then no more air's coming out. Let it cure, I'll come back tomorrow, sand, and I'll be probably apply my flood coat. The next step, I'm gonna sand off my icicles from all my seal coats, sand this down and start coating the bottom with clear. It's not gonna be a finished beautiful coat like the top and sides, but I'm gonna take care of this blue and all these Tyvek tape lines, get it a little more presentable, and then we're back flipping it over to finish out this project. Here we go. The quickest and most efficient way to remove epoxy icicle drips is with the 50 grit metal fiber sanding disc on a grinder. You can also use a 60 grit on a random orbital sander if that's all you have. That takes care of it pretty quickly as well. But this is the best tool right here, 50 grit metal fiber sanding disc. Quick work, don't blink. It's gonna get dusty. Bottom is finished, complete, laying out perfectly. I'm gonna flip it over, eliminate the drips from the seal coats on the bottom, sand those down, sand the whole surface, and do my final flood coat. I got my legs ordered up. When those here, we're gonna come back, install the legs, and then figure out how to get this table to my customer across the country. I'm mixing up 128 ounces per flood coat. That's about 10 pounds each coat. Here we go. All right, it's final flood coat time. I'm gonna mix up 3 ounces per square foot of stone coat countertop epoxy. I'll use the notch trowel to evenly spread my material. I'll mix for 2 minutes. I'm mixed with the paddle mixer. We're gonna mix with that trowel as we spread it, and then I'm gonna mix with that chop brush with Stone Coat's 3 mix method. no sticky spots. It's gonna lay out perfectly flat. All right, we've evenly spread the material with that notch trowel. If we don't chop the top, you'll see iridescent, subtle trowel marks when this epoxy dries. So we're gonna chop the top. It does two things. We're gonna mix one more time and eliminate trowel marks. Step one, de-shed that brush. What does de-shed mean? Pull on the bristles, kind of get crazy with it, because the last thing you want are bristles in your finished coat or in any coat. We've taken time as we've torched to keep an eye out for the bristles. They're easy to remove when the epoxy's wet. You just get a couple sticks. You could use a utility knife, get right under that bristle. It comes right out. Hit it with a torch. It'll lay right back out. You'll never know you removed that. If you miss them and it's dries in the epoxy, it's a little harder to fix. You're gonna have to sand that out with 220 grit sandpaper, get it completely gone. You'll have to coat the table an additional time. That's gonna add some depth. It's gonna eliminate that bristle, and your customer will never know it happened. But the pro tip here, get the bristles out when the epoxy's wet. You're gonna save yourself a coat. Time to chop. Here, I'm just gonna wet it down with the residual epoxy. That just pre-primes it, we call it. Keeps from pulling up too much material when we go to start chopping. And I'm just gonna do this in a random pattern over the entire surface. And you kind of just go violent with it and get crazy. It's not a big deal. It's not hard to do. There's no real technique or skill other than using this heel of the brush. And when I push it down, it spreads out and gets the most coverage when I go to chop. And these brushes, if I'm doing sample pieces, I will save them. I'll clean them out with acetone. If I'm doing a finished product like this, if I'm doing a clear coat, I will never, ever use an old brush that has acetone in it. I would always go for a new brush. I mean, the customer is gonna pay a lot of money for this table. You can fork out the $5 and give them a new chop brush finish on your final coat. Oh no, my epoxy, it's full of bubbles. It's okay. A heat source will quickly remove any bubbles you incorporate into the epoxy. Stone Coat epoxy was designed and formulated for the do-it-yourselfer. It's mega user-friendly. You don't have to panic or stress or be worried about it. You have tons of time to work with it. So far, so good. This is torching out really, really nice. Just keep your eyes out for bristles as you do your torching. That way we can get them out while the epoxy's wet. There's something right there. I don't know if you could see it, but I could see it in the reflection. Oh my gosh, look at that. My table legs are assembled. It's time to attach the tabletop to my structure, to my table legs. Guys, the most important part of this step is make sure you're nice and square and all your overhangs are perfect. Once they are, I'm gonna go mark that with a Sharpie. We'll flip the table, set it on something nice and soft. Then I'll drill out those holes, install the inserts. That way we can mount our tabletop to this legs with mechanical screws, and we're not risking, blowing out our holes with lag bolts, because I'm gonna have to take this apart and ship it across the country. So these are my mounting wings. I have 3 on each side. I'm just gonna completely fill in the dot here with my black permanent marker, fill in as much as I can, so then I'll know exactly where the center of this hole is. Big shout out to the old shipping crew at Stone Coat here in Grants Pass. Miss working with you boys. I needed their help moving this big old table. The key here is do not let that plywood rub against that table. I got dense foam on the bottom and sides and nice soft packaging foam right on that surface. Guys, I hope you learned some tips and tricks that are gonna get you headed down the road making a river table with Stone Coat epoxy. We have another great tutorial. If you want to keep this binge watch going, check out our river table masterclass with LED lights included. From all of us here at Stone Coat Countertops, don't forget you got this. We're gonna see you on the next video. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Stone